have this idea, Tim, that Rooart wanted to bring the standouts of the Australian indie scene to the world, and maybe the label, For the Blink of an Eye, was a sort of distillation of the aspiration of the artist to reach a wider audience and the industry itself seeking to capitalise on those talents and aspirations. But of Rooart, you've said, I'd be at home reading about these great stacks and the great 1960s labels, but when you went into Rooart, it felt like it was the opposite of a fashion magazine. I wondered, are you talking about superficiality? What were you talking about?
Sure, I'll try and qualify that. There are a lot of good people who work there and who are still friends and acquaintances to this day. Any little project or thought that we thought was great would conflict with either with what Chris Murphy thought. He always stepped on my feet when we talked. I never quite understood that because I didn't know much about Chris. He was a successful person in entertainment and I just deferred to that. I had no reason. I was an INXS fan as a kid. But it seemed to, and I only would discover things through Kate Stewart, our manager, who was the single most important person in our band's time. Kate, then Todd Wagstaff, who worked at Rooart. Kate was really wary of Rooart and I trusted her instincts, but the raging diva in me wanted everything they had to offer, whether it was blow or playing bigger venues, getting big tour support. So a lot of my impressions about Rooart, I like going in there saying, oh, there's Andrew and there's Katie and there's, going to see hanging out with Todd was really good fun. But then, some of Chris's ideas just were anathema to us, or probably more anathema to Kate, and I trusted Kate's instincts more than anyone's.
You mean in terms of how, and there's the example of Chris suggesting that UMI do this big entertainment centre show.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like treating UMI as the next INXS.
Yeah, which how UMI got to be signed in the first place is absurd to me because we weren't in any way the best band even to come from Castle Hill at that stage. And at the first approaches from Rooart, I didn't see it. I went along with it, but I was completely surprised. But I was expecting someone to pull the curtain down and say, we're joking, it's all a piss take. So Kate putting trust in us, and then Todd Wagstaff obviously seeing something in us, and forever grateful to him for that. But unfortunately, my prescient memory was when our band's third record, Ali Daly, it was an ARIA Awards, and we were nominated for a lot of them, and there was a party beforehand, and there were people from Shock Records there who were distributing our records at the time, and Chris Murphy got up in front of this whole group of people and said, I've just sold Rooart or passed it on to BMG, or Rusty would know more about, and Andy would know more about what actually went on, but he kind of pulled all the joy and fun out of that experience for us. And the night of those ARIA Awards, where we were supposed to be celebrating, we had people from Shock in tears. Shock Records, a company that we admired enormously, and going, what happened? We've only been with you for 6 months and suddenly you're not our band anymore. I thought it probably wasn't malicious. Chris Murphy's a businessman and I don't understand that. But it just seemed really terrible timing. And the next morning we were on a very early flight to London to start a tour. And it wasn't a fun plane flight, even though he had just had all this success at an award show. And
I wonder if there was a domino effect from the sale of Rooart to BMG, which saw Shock later wind up having layoffs, later in the decade. I mean, it may have had nothing to do with it, but I know that had an impact on Glide. Mm-hmm. Did the dominoes start falling for Shock at that point, I wonder?
Oh, gee, I'm not the person qualified to answer that, but yeah, interesting. Look, when you asked the question about speaking to someone from Mandelbrot about us, and I got the inference that it was thought that we were the treasured children and treated a little better than most. It's very possible that just Rusty and Kate and Andy had very strong ethical concerns about what was going on with the band, but I didn't. And I think that they had to acquiesce to me only because I was the guy who wrote the songs at that stage. But yeah, if it's very possible that there was destructive fallout from decisions made from the top. It was because of course when the company started and we Rat Cat and that huge phenomena, I was quite close to, because only through Joe Segredo, who was Rat Cat's manager, lovely Joe, and he was very close to Nick Tischler, our first bass player, and my best friend, and so we got to experience it, and we did a lot of those shows, and a lot of decisions made for Rat Cat just seemed really, really odd and clashing, because they were suddenly this pop band, because they were good, wrote these great pop singles and all handsome as hell, and but just something just didn't quite fit. And that's the people who worked at Rooart, Kim Frankovich, wonderful, wonderful woman, who was the boss at that time.
I'll contextualise my next question in relation to this, because I think I managed to get Todd pretty well offside by failing to do so when I talked with him.
Let me talk to him.
When you and I joined Rooart, you did have Todd in your corner, and the label were more concerned with bands like the Screaming Jets when you joined, until they saw you and Mai's potential.
Well, so they should have. I mean, the Screaming Jets were fully formed big rock band at that stage, and I've never spoken to Dave Gleeson about it. We're acquaintances, and we used to work with his wife Katie, and that was because, and we didn't socialise with the Jets much, but we could see that their attitude was these guys are hacks, and rightly so, because, and think of us as being indie rock snobs, when really we just weren't at all. I mean, when at those couple of ARIA Awards and I got up and said, I don't know what's alternative about us, that was quite genuine. There was Severed Heads, Nunbait, or other bands were alternative to what was churning out. We were only alternative because we weren't very good, and we sounded a little jagged, little when really we wanted to be. When I choose to accept the challenge, I'm Tim Rogers. This is Disappear Here. Ray Martin, Disappear Here. I'm George Negus, Disappear Here. And I'm Jan Vent, Disappear Here.
That's
Where did that come from?